In my career, I've always aspired to design big ideas and craft them to the smallest detail. So we ripped off the facade that we had completed on the end of the building. Every other one has a large Swarovski crystal, probably as big as your fist.
We have the presence of the mastermind behind the stunning Jio World Convention Center. Please put your hands together to welcome on stage none other than the principal architect of TVS Design, Steven Clem.
Well, this is a great honor for me. Interestingly, this is the first time I've been able to publicly speak about this project, and I've been working on this thing since 2006, if you can imagine. It was such a protected idea as we were developing the solution year after year, and it has grown into something quite extraordinary. And I have actually practiced for 45 years. So it may not look it, hopefully not, but I'm an architect and an interior designer, and I have led a huge wealth of projects. And this one has occupied a third of my career to date. And we still have more going on, and in fact there's some upcoming release when the retail project opens up in the near future and a few other things. Still, the most spectacular project I've ever been involved in. And I think what I wanted to also say is there are a lot of really great people that have been associated with this project. It's not often that anyone has a duration of a project like this one has. And so I have nurtured some very dear friends from the client side, the consultants, the construction side, and it has really been an honor for me to stay connected with this. This is close to my 40th trip over here, so I've been very familiar, although the work is work, and so we have been close to this site and have developed this thing before it was even a hole in the ground. What I wanted to, from the start, I wanted to thank a few of my groups. The most important is Reliance Industry, and they hired us in 2006. I'm going to tell you kind of how we got here. That's why it's TVS in India. And then, of course, perhaps the most important is Mukesh and Nita Ambani. If I've had one presentation with Mrs. Ambani, it's probably like 50 or 60. And I have grown to admire her as one of the most outstanding people I've ever met. And her design awareness and sensibility and advancement of thoughts have really been extraordinary. And one of the things that's really been a challenge, particularly for younger staff, and I enjoy speaking to all of the architects and interior designers, that you have to learn to become agile and be patient. Because when you're working with a creative client like this, they wake up with new ideas, you know, and it's a new change. And so there are many things that you're going to see in this presentation that we actually designed more than once. And every time they got better. And so as a young architect or designer, you feel like you've just invested so heavily into a design. It's like, I just want to see that built. Well, guess what? You're going to get to do it again, you know, and it will get better. So be patient. So what we're going to talk about is what we accomplished here. But before I do that, I also wanted to share with you, I'm sure some of you might ask, well, how did a firm out of Atlanta, Georgia, you know, get to do work in Mumbai, India? And it's a fair question, but what is important to note is that our firm, which is about 160 people today, has been around since 1968, and we are one of the premier architects and designers for public assembly and convention center environments around the world. We have 85 convention centers. We have 4 of the largest in the US, 4 of the largest in China, the biggest in Central America, and now, you know, the distinguished project here in India, and more, you know, on the way right now. So that's given us a great platform for understanding. And I think what's also important to know is when we do these big buildings, they are machines. They really first have to function, high-performance solutions, and particularly in a convention center or an event like this, to be able to load in, set up quickly, transform, 2 days later become something else, and yet at the same time have to create spaces that are memorable for the public customer experience that really have a drama to their design. And I've likened in my career, I've always aspired to design big ideas and craft them to the smallest detail. So my participation from beginning to end has been continuous. And so I know the projects that I build and design and have had great ownership of those. But other people that are really important to note, and I want to give credit to, is we also had a partner here in Mumbai with architect Hafiz Contractor and his group. Many designers, architects associated with that produced the tender documents and the construction administration for a lot of this work. And they were outstanding partners, and then there's aspects about this development, including the residential that they designed themselves. And, but in large part, we did the majority of the project. But the other great partner is Samsung. It's one of the largest contractors in the world. They have some amazing talent that is local to India, but also their Korean partners in leadership have actually been the best. And I have done so many projects, and yet I can have a dialogue with these guys on a daily basis on WhatsApp, which I do really almost 7 days a week, and it's extraordinary. So I've been very honored. But I want to show you a few projects that are in my background and some of our work. This was one of our projects. We've got several aquariums. This was for a long time the world's largest aquarium that we did in Georgia, and you can start to see some of the character and levels of detail. For an immersive experience, this starts to show what an experiential environment can be like. And then the other aspect about it is some of these big exposition centers. This is a recently completed Music City Center in Nashville, Tennessee. And you can see this is an area where country music is kind of the foundation. And so the building is designed with the spirit of musical instruments. And so the shape making and the details, and even this grand ballroom, which is like being on the inside of a musical instrument, really brings the richness and character. Another one we just completed was the Las Vegas Convention Center, and it too needed an iconic design solution. And so a lot of this was taken from reference from the mountains, the adjacent mountains there, to give a signature front door experience for this facility, one of the biggest entertainment cities in the world. And then this is some of my most recent projects, work that I've been doing while we've been working over here. This is a building that's now home to our new offices, and it was formerly a headquarters for AT&T, and I was the young architect 3 years out of school in 1981 that was one of the architects on this building, and so most recently I got to convert it from a headquarters project to a multi-tenant building. And then you can see some of the grand, detail of this building. And I was telling a few people that this is all Corten looking porcelain tile. And it is absolutely extraordinary and a very innovative application, both interior and exterior. A project down in Miami, and it was interesting on this particular project through the experience on this building, where we have put over 1 million square feet of stone, natural stone. I was introduced to this stone provider, supplier and quarry owner in Carrara, and brought his work to Miami. And this is also the same stone material that was used in the new World Trade Center replacement building in New York. And then finally, a project that was our former office we've just moved from, and this was a conversion, a renovation. We're doing a lot of repositioning, redesigning old buildings of the 80s and the 90s and repositioning these projects. This one we just were awarded the top commercial project in North America by the Ceramics of Italy. And one of the interesting things here too is bringing reclaimed wood back into a project. And so this was, trees were formerly on the site that were brought back into the lobby to tell stories and engage people in the relationship of a space. So now I want to move on and talk about this project and the design concept behind it, as you kind of identified a minute ago. When we first started a project like this, the reason we were brought in was because of our convention center experience, but also that we had the diversity of market experience in our own house, being able to do performing arts and all the other program aspects about this design. and office building and clubhouse and a variety of other pieces. So it's really important to organize a concept and how you're going to piece all that together. But the other aspect is we needed to honor India. We recognize, and it's been actually an approach of ours, that wherever we design a building, it has to have a regional reflection about where it resides. We don't want to just impart an international design style and drop it in anywhere across the world. It needs to live as a presence and have ownership in a community. And so with that, and it's also intriguing that we had numerous Indian architects and designers on our staff at the time. This is back 2006, and when things were a little more robust before we went into a recession, we had a larger staff of people. At one point, we had 40 people working on this project because this is close to an 8 million square foot building. So we had to do our own research and then develop a solution that would resonate culturally with India. And so we chose as a motive for the design the Lotus, because it has so many, it's a national flower of India, as you all know, but it also has so much opportunity to create complexity and layers and different kind of details that we were able to translate into many aspects about this project. And you'll see as you tour through here, how we were able to utilize that. But the other aspect, as I just mentioned, we had many program elements. So the Convention Center, the Performing Arts Center, which has a 2,000-seat theater, a 250 and a 125. We had the office building, approximately 1 million square feet. We got a retail plaza that's under construction. We got an elevated rooftop and residential and above that. So we had all these pieces that had to create some kind of common language. And so in our research and investigation of art and craft and detail, one of the things that resonated with us was jewelry of India. There is very few places, and in fact, I've learned more in my time associated with this project about the richness of India and in my opinion, this is probably one of the highlights in the world of that capability, as well as the fabrication craft. So we resonated on a necklace that has multiple ornamental components to it, linkages between spaces, but very often has a star, gem, or pendant for that. And I'll tell you very interesting, and there's a few of my colleague friends with Reliance in here that remember this meeting. We presented this concept to Mrs. Ambani, or we attempted to present this concept. And so we related the necklace, and we were going through all the linkages, and as we were starting to say, and the pendant is, she said, the pendant is my theater, right? And so now she acknowledged immediately, embraced the concept, and forevermore, it became the signature piece of the project. And so you can start to see that in some of the architectural language that we started to develop. And so this is the front door. It was very important to be iconic. She wanted something that was as distinctive and singular, as, Australia's, major facility. But yet at the same time, it needed to speak India. And so we developed the pedal concept that you see elevated. It's at the north end of the building. And actually, this thing was completed before the concept of the art house ever came about. That was another kind of wake up, there's a new idea, I want to convert this to an art house. So we ripped off the facade that we had completed on the end of the building and developed this third pedal design that overlays this. And so a quite extraordinary experience. And you'll see more detail of that. And then, of course, the Grand Plaza, the Dhirubhai Ambani Square, the signature plaza in the Lotus, motif also that is, if you've seen it in performance, it's quite extraordinary with fire and water. It is a dance. And that's another aspect about our design thesis as well. We were educated through Mrs. Ambani about the importance of the classical dance and hand gestures and organized thoughts that are uplifting and positive. And so much of our design centered about achieving those solutions. And at the same time, you see the other aspect of the building is very kind of rigid, strict, straight, around the perimeter. And that was purposeful in a sense that it was maximizing the perimeter of the building. This wasn't just a decorative icon that was shaped for shape's sake. This was a machine that I mentioned to you, but yet it was on the inside that we really started to, well, I'll tell you a little more on this, but that we were able to flourish the front door in contrast to the balance of the project. And you can see some of the lovely detail that was developed here. This last petal that we did, this was actually at the opening back in March. And if any of you were able to see that, it was just one of the most extraordinary events that I've ever been to. And to see this building in that performance, it was really quite amazing. This detail of this last petal that we developed, the overlay, this was actually fabricated outside of Dubai, and it was modularly developed. We brought it in, and this thing actually has the ability to have a strobe effect, not too dissimilar than the Eiffel Tower. And so, wanted to talk more specifically about this convention center component. While we have this straight facade, it enabled us to have 4 entry points. We have an interior circulation route that gets us to the 5,000 parking spaces that were on the lower level, but we also had to create this dramatic concourse space of gathering. So each of these pavilions, each of these locations has a singular look. And so again, we used our kind of Lotus planning, created these scallop facades, so never can you look down the space and see one continuous gallery. It's a series of spaces, each of them unique and individual and complementary to one another. And the other thing that we did a great deal of attention throughout this development is acoustics. We had an acoustical consultant involved in this in every aspect of this project. All of the ceilings here, the perforated ceilings, are acoustically backed. All the petals that you see on the ceiling are acoustical plaster solutions. And then you can see just the contrast of detail. I think one of the most successful things we did here also are all these columns. These are all Corian, DuPont Corian. It has been so successful here, I've managed to take it to many other cities but I will tell you that I haven't seen anybody do it as well as the craftsmen that are here in India. And it's fantastic, whether it's an inside or outside project. The other element that we added in here, many jollies. We learned more about jollies through the course of this project and probably developed thousands of solutions by the time we got agreed upon solutions. But the other aspect, and you mentioned CMC, they were heavily involved in procurement of some of the stone with us in fabrication. But all of the stone that we brought from Italy, all of that was actually backed and then sliced in half, and we had to dry lay and match every piece of stone that's in this space. And so that's part of its effectiveness. And then these chandeliers, each of the entry halls has a loss fit chandelier of earth, fire, water, wind. And so each has their own identity, but yet has a commonality and linkage back to the necklace. The other aspect about it in the convention center, you'll see that is mostly stainless steel. It's white metal. When we move upstairs to the 3rd floor, where it's more luxurious, we've transitioned to gold metals. In many cases, PVD coatings and other things to achieve that look and detail. But again, some of that craftsmanship is what makes it so successful. And then, of course, we're standing, I think one of the more unique things for all the convention centers is our tree columns in this space. These things are quite dramatic. They give a sense of architecture to what is utility space that has to be transformed into whatever function, but it still gives an overarching sense of design even on the large expansive area. So moving upstairs, and if you haven't been there, you need to find a way to get up to the 3rd floor. And that's where we have the Jazmin Hall and the Lotus Ballroom. These are 2 very extravagant and amazing spaces. But to get there, the most effective way is the world's largest passenger elevator. This is a 100-person elevator that we designed, and along with AHC as a partner. And you can see with a large glass opening, windows on both sides, but it also has mirrors. Mrs. Ambani's a big fan of mirrors. So 100 people looks like about 1,000 when you stand in this thing. So, and then when we go upstairs, and part of the rest of this presentation, I'm also going to show you some of the details and how we got to the scale, because it's very challenging, and it's something that I love to do, is design big spaces, and also, again, back to small detail. So these are spaces that are 30 plus feet tall, and so it's really hard to address the scale and proportion of these spaces. You can see the design patterns we have on the floor, you know, again, in another interpretation of the Lotus solution. But in the ceiling, this is one of my architect colleagues. You see the GRG, glass reinforced gypsum panels. These were built by Gillespie out in England and then sent over here. And now how that interfaces into a ceiling design. So it now becomes, it's complex, jolly in its own right, but it's acoustical, and we have all the lighting, you know, air distribution, Wi-Fi, everything is built into this solution, and you can see how grand that is. And then in the flex hall itself, 100,000 square feet, subdivisible in two spaces, long span. It had trusses that are sitting above that support the parking deck and the level 7, or the roof garden up above that, so it was super space. And this too has been very versatile. You know, a custom ceiling pattern that actually is an organic solution that changes all the way through, so it's not a single repeat. And it has LED lighting through, so it can be completely transformed to its effect and presence. And then the Lotus Ballroom. This is a project that we've probably designed 3 times before we finally came to this solution. And you can see the character of this space, very organic. The gold color that's in the ceiling was a reference to a river of gold. And then we had a very organic personality to that. But I wanted to showcase for a moment the chandelier itself. This was quite an exciting development project. We partnered with Swarovski for this and some other aspects about this job. And this was an early concept sketch by one of my designers, you know, that start to set the direction of this. And these chandeliers are about 25 feet in diameter, so their scale is very large. Some of the other detail that is also party to this thing, because everything needed to be a complement to one another. You can see the vertical jolly patterns. Everything that we did in this space started to address even the little ribbons on the ceiling where we can hang flowers for wedding events. And so it becomes, again, very much part of the culture over here. But these chandeliers, each of these has 180,000 crystals in that. And actually the lower portion of it actually is there. You can take a crank and release it, drop down for a full manway ladder to climb up inside of this thing to be able to change out all the lighting fixtures without having to get ladders and other things for that. And you can see just the level of detail, quite extraordinary, you know, in each of these solutions. All right, so now we want to talk about the convention center. Excuse me, the cultural center. This really was a passionate project, and it really garnered tremendous attention, in particular by Mrs. Ambani, but it really became an opportunity to do something that is unique from any other place in the world, and it has some design solutions. My former consultant colleague, Benton Dellinger, is in the audience here. We're actually going to do a little tour tomorrow for those that want to participate. But he's been involved in this thing from the get-go and probably facilitated the achievement of this more than anybody else in the building and in the facility, and has made certain that it has achieved its performance excellence that it has today. But we really wanted to embrace, again, the design motif, but also give it an international presence. So this is actually on the first elevated floor. You'll see that there's concessions on all the levels, but one of the big components of it is a vertical circulation where we have 2 stairs that are actually cantilevered off of the wall and still in a concrete wall, and that are like 9-foot cantilevers, so they're quite substantial and clad with stone. And then the water body that we developed underneath that with the mosaic tiles that we work with Sitges out of Ravenna on. And you can see again the scale of this space and the ease of interconnectivity and the brand design for this. Also the LED lighting. There are thousands of feet of this that were part of this 60-foot high wall in this design. And the Peishvai that was just recently put in as part of the art program just gives further drama of uniqueness and specialty to that space, and with the temple in the foreground. This is a picture I actually took when I was at the Performing Art, the grand opening. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the grand entry wall. While we haven't had a lot of photography of that kind of space yet for the Grand Theater, if you'll see that the detail on the back wall, this is where it started. And we developed this three-dimensional 1 meter relief at a GRG, glass reinforced gypsum, with a painted finish. And then every other one has a large Swarovski crystal, probably as big as your fist, integrated into that. And so now when you play that out over a curve, you know, you can get the kind of order of scale and magnitude of that kind of design. So again, it's starting to reinforce layer upon layer upon layer of the design. And you can see this from the top level of the facility. And then the theater itself really is a grand experience. This was one of my first sketches on creating the sidewalls and the boxes for the theater, and we were starting to evolve what the ceiling was going to be. And the ceiling was very important to be a finished space. I did not want to have a situation where you're sitting there looking at all the technical balconies, technical catwalks and all the other light rigging that was in that space. And so these were some early versions that we developed. You can see the orchid on the far left. That was a consideration, and then we came back to the lotus. And the one in the center is the one that we ultimately developed. And you can start to see how that section profile, the dimensional relief that you see in this space, how significant it is. And what's important, now that you see this plan, you can see how dimensional it was, how sweeping these elements are. Its purpose, as I mentioned to you, not only is that acoustical or the visual kind of planning, but it also is a very acoustically transparent solution. And then we also had to design a solution that would actually provide lighting if it were a plenary hall, where you could have a large conference and have a uniformity of lighting through that space. And so this was a model that was built by Wagner Bureau, the fabricator for this component. And so this will give you a good sense of the shape. I guess I'm standing in front of the image here. A good sense of that shape of space. And you can see as it rotates that now from the customer, the patron side, that you can't see anything but the stage. But when this thing rotates in its full circle, if you're standing on the stage, now the lighting is projected specifically to the performer. And so it has really worked out quite extraordinary. But I wanted you to see also the scale. When you go in the theater, you'll never appreciate how big this is, because we had built scaffolding at multi-tiers to be able to get up and suspend this component. And you can see also the size of the openings. All of those were necessary to become acoustically transparent. So sound could go through. We had acoustic control up at the high ceiling. But you can also see the reflective color that's on this. We put a hammered finish on the equivalent of Corian, but kind of a silvered finish and a hammered texture, so it would pick up light. And each one of these crystals is another Swarovski crystal that was photometrically developed. Each has its own LED, and it is fully programmable so that we can do anything with the ceiling. It's virtually a motion video. And so here was some very early, color exercises that we went through, and you can just see how it can effectively change the whole effect of the space. And when it becomes a dynamic component, then it really can be an extension of the performance of the stage delivery as well. I wanted to put this one in because these are two dear friends that worked on this project throughout. It was a whole separate contractor within the Samsung group that developed the theater. and the level of detail is the best that I've ever been able to work on. And you can start to see the effect just in a normal light, and you can see how effectively it could be as a plenary hall. So you have uniformity of light distribution. So if you're taking notes and you're still watching a performance on stage or actually a lecture, you know that you got this quality of space. And you start to sense the scale. And see, now that you're separated from this thing, it's not nearly as big, even though it covers a lot of area, than what you might have perceived. And from the stage, it's just a fantastic place to be. And so here's the grand view, again from the stage. Now you can see those catwalks and how they interplayed amongst the ceiling. And the other aspect about it is the development of the boxes themselves. There's 18 of these diamond boxes, but these were all conceived with a mosaic tile in a design pattern where the gold tile was initiated from the stage, so it had a sense of natural glow from the stage performance itself. And so this is the end result, and this was all fabricated in Ravenna, brought in sheets and patterns, and then overlaid directly into the space. And then you could also see, I'll take you back, another level of jollies that we did for the Lotus pattern on the side walls. Behind all of that is acoustical absorption and the Altmos surround distribution of speakers. So the integration of this space and the other acoustical management was really very high. And then here just is one of many photographs of what this thing can become. My favorite thing is to let it be part of the theater performance. And I think that as these different shows come in and different producers, they're going to start to discover the dynamicism of what this thing can be that is unique to any other place on the planet and really makes this location in India so singular. And this is the 250, the studio space, and Benton's team with Theater Projects at the time helped develop these solutions. This is retractable seating, and so it can be configured in multiple applications. But again, it gives a smaller, more intimate, personal kind of experience. And I think I've got like 2 slides left. This is the art house. This was that late addition, to the project. And in the big pedal over the top of that purposely was to give it some privacy or somewhat of a veil from the inside looking out, and you can see the plaza below. And so that is, that's our experience in India. We have more to come. We have things that we're still continuing on. After we finish this conference, I got a couple more days of just continuing this work effort to advance the projects. And I just want to reiterate, this is probably the best personal architecture and design experience I've had in my career. And there is so much to have learned. And it really has become a passionate relationship for me to be associated with India. So thank you.